There are moments in Reacher when the biggest revelation isn't about who committed the crime. It is about who was powerful enough to make everyone else believe the wrong story. And if episode 5 follows the direction that this season has been building toward, then Reacher may finally reach that exact moment. Because the conspiracy we've been watching unfold may be much bigger than a single criminal organization. It may not even be about money. It may not be about revenge. And it may not be about eliminating Reacher. The real objective could be something far more dangerous. Control. And in episode 5, Reacher could finally discover the person standing behind the entire operation. The person who has been moving pieces from the shadows. The person who understood that Reacher would eventually investigate. The person who may have deliberately left clues for him to find. And that last possibility is what makes this conspiracy so disturbing. What if Reacher hasn't actually been uncovering the conspiracy? What if the conspiracy has been leading Reacher exactly where somebody wants him to go? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're breaking down one of the biggest questions surrounding Reacher Season 4 Episode 5, who is the real enemy behind the conspiracy? We're going to examine the clues, the characters, the possible betrayal, Reacher's investigation, and the revelation that could completely change our understanding of everything that has happened so far. And before we continue, there is one thing you need to understand. Reacher doesn't normally need many pieces to solve a puzzle. Give him a suspicious death. Give him a missing person. Give him a lie. Give him somebody who doesn't belong. And eventually, Reacher connects the dots. But this time, the dots may have been deliberately placed. And that's where things get interesting. At the beginning of episode 5, Reacher is likely to be operating with more information than he had in the previous episodes. But instead of making the situation easier, the new information creates another problem. Several pieces of evidence appear to point toward the same enemy. That's exactly what Reacher should want. But he doesn't trust easy answers. That's one of the defining characteristics of Jack Reacher. He doesn't simply ask, who looks guilty? He asks, who benefits? That distinction could become extremely important in episode 5. Because the person appearing to be responsible for the conspiracy may actually be only the middleman. Reacher could discover that the operation has several layers. At the bottom are the people carrying out orders. Above them are the people organizing those operations. And somewhere above all of them is someone with enough influence to make the entire system work. That's the person Reacher needs to find. And the first major clue could come from something extremely small. A document, a phone call, a financial transaction, a name, or even a piece of information that shouldn't have been available to one of the suspects. Reacher notices the inconsistency. Everyone else might ignore it. But Reacher doesn't. He starts asking questions. And that's when the investigation changes direction. One of the most interesting possibilities for episode 5 is that Reacher discovers that several seemingly unrelated events have the same origin. At first, these events appear disconnected. Different locations. Different people. Different motives. But Reacher notices one common element. Someone had access to information they shouldn't have had. That's the kind of detail Reacher understands immediately. Because conspiracies don't survive through violence alone. They survive through information. Someone has to know where people are. Someone has to know what investigators are doing. Someone has to know when certain operations are happening. And someone has to know what Reacher is planning. That's a very important question. How does the enemy keep staying one step ahead of him? There are only a few possibilities. Someone is watching Reacher. Someone is feeding information to the enemy. Or Reacher has been unknowingly following information that was designed to reach him. And if the third possibility is true, then episode 5 could reveal one of the smartest moves the enemy has made all season. Reacher's investigation naturally leads him toward the possibility that someone inside the operation is compromised. A mole. And this is where the tension becomes much stronger. Because Reacher isn't simply searching for an external enemy anymore. He's searching among people who may appear to be allies. And Reacher knows something important. The most dangerous traitor isn't necessarily the person who looks suspicious. It's the person nobody suspects. That means episode 5 could spend a significant amount of time making the audience question almost everyone around Reacher. One character may act nervous. Another may disappear at the wrong time. Someone may provide information that turns out to be inaccurate. And another character may suddenly know something that Reacher never told them. That last detail would immediately get Reacher's attention. Because Reacher doesn't forget conversations. He doesn't forget faces. And he certainly doesn't forget information. So when someone knows something they shouldn't know, Reacher starts thinking. And once Reacher starts thinking, somebody is in serious trouble. Now we get to what could be one of the biggest emotional moments of episode 5. The possibility that the betrayal isn't coming from an obvious enemy. It's coming from somebody Reacher trusted. This doesn't necessarily mean that character is completely evil. And that's important. A good Reacher twist isn't simply, surprise, this person is bad. The better twist is, this person was forced into doing something they never wanted to do. Imagine Reacher discovering that someone close to the investigation has been communicating with the enemy. At first, he believes they're a traitor. But then he discovers the truth. They were threatened. Their family was targeted. They were blackmailed. Or perhaps they were promised protection. That would create a much more complicated situation. Because Reacher isn't someone who automatically forgives betrayal. But he understands coercion. And if the person was forced into cooperating, Reacher may realize that they are actually another victim of the conspiracy. And that leads to the next question. Who was powerful enough to threaten them? This could be the point where episode 5 changes the entire season. Reacher discovers that the conspiracy isn't operating in isolation. There are connections. Money. Influence. Resources. People in positions of authority. And perhaps even individuals who appear completely legitimate. That's what makes the enemy so dangerous. A criminal hiding in a warehouse is easy to find. A criminal hiding behind legitimate institutions is much harder. And Reacher understands that. So instead of immediately attacking the organization, he starts mapping it. Who gives the orders? Who moves the money? Who provides transportation? Who protects the operation? Who destroys evidence? Who benefits? And eventually, the structure begins to appear. At the bottom are the soldiers. Above them are the handlers. Above them are the planners. But there is still one empty space. The person at the top. And Reacher knows that's where he needs to look. This is where I think episode 5 could deliver its biggest surprise. The person behind everything may not be the obvious villain we've been watching. In fact, the obvious villain may have been deliberately positioned as a distraction. Think about it. If you're running a massive conspiracy and you know someone like Jack Reacher is investigating, what would you do? You wouldn't simply try to kill him. You would give him someone to chase. Give him a believable suspect. Give him evidence. Give him a trail. And while Reacher follows that trail, you continue operating somewhere else. That could explain several strange developments throughout the season. Reacher may finally realize that every time he thought he was getting closer to the enemy was actually getting further away. And that realization could be devastating. Because it means the enemy understands him. Maybe better than Reacher understands them. Reacher's greatest strength is his ability to act independently. He doesn't need an army. He doesn't need permission. He doesn't need a large team. But in a conspiracy this complicated, independence can become a weakness. Because Reacher isn't always aware of what's happening behind him. While he's confronting one threat, another threat may be moving into position. And that's exactly what the enemy could be exploiting. Reacher is predictable in one sense. When he sees injustice, he investigates. When someone threatens innocent people, he intervenes. When someone attacks him, he retaliates. The enemy could use those instincts against him. They could create problems that force Reacher to respond. And every response could reveal more information about his methods. That's frightening. Because the enemy isn't simply reacting to Reacher. They could be studying him. Now imagine the scene. Reacher is standing somewhere quiet. No gunfight. No explosion. No dramatic music. Just Reacher looking at a piece of evidence, and suddenly, everything makes sense. The missing information. The false lead. The suspicious death. The financial connection. The betrayal. The people who disappeared. The timing. Everything connects. And Reacher says something simple. Something like, "That's not the operation." Pause. The operation is the cover. That would be the kind of revelation that completely changes the episode. Because Reacher finally realizes the conspiracy isn't designed to achieve the goal everyone thought it was designed to achieve. The visible operation is simply camouflage. The real objective is somewhere else. And the person behind it has been hiding in plain sight. So what could the real objective be? There are several possibilities. It could involve gaining access to classified information. It could involve controlling a powerful organization. It could involve eliminating specific people who stand in the way of a larger plan. It could involve manipulating an investigation. Or it could be connected to something from Reacher's past. And that final possibility would make the story even more personal. Because Reacher has spent years moving from place to place. He's made enemies. He's dismantled organizations. He's exposed corruption. He's humiliated powerful people. So there are plenty of reasons someone might want revenge. But revenge alone doesn't feel big enough. The real enemy may want something from Reacher. Something only Reacher can provide. Or perhaps they want Reacher to uncover something that nobody else could find. Which raises an even darker possibility. Maybe Reacher is the key to the entire conspiracy. This could be one of the most shocking interpretations of Episode 5. What if Reacher was never supposed to die? What if the enemy needs him alive? Think about how strange that would make some of the previous attacks. If the enemy truly wanted Reacher dead, they would need to eliminate him quickly. But if they repeatedly create situations where Reacher survives, that could indicate something else. They need him. They need his skills. His reputation. His investigation. His ability to reach places ordinary investigators cannot. That would mean Reacher isn't merely the detective. He's a tool. And once he realizes that, everything changes. Because now his objective isn't simply to stop the conspiracy. It's to figure out why they wanted him involved in the first place. Now we arrive at the central question. Who is pulling the strings? There are three major possibilities. The first is a powerful figure operating within the criminal world. The second is someone connected to the institutions Reacher has been investigating. And the third is someone much closer to the operation. Someone Reacher has already encountered. The third possibility is the most dangerous. Because if the mastermind has already appeared on screen, the clues may have been there all along. Maybe their dialogue sounded harmless. Maybe they were helping Reacher. Maybe they even saved his life. But that could have been part of the plan. A mastermind doesn't always need to attack the hero. Sometimes the smartest thing they can do is help the hero. Because helping Reacher would earn his trust. And trust is more valuable than fear. Reacher doesn't confront the suspected mastermind immediately. That's not how he operates. He tests them. He gives them false information. He watches what happens. If the information reaches the enemy, Reacher knows where the leak is. This could produce one of the most satisfying sequences of the episode. Reacher deliberately tells different people different versions of the same story. Then he waits. Eventually, the enemy reacts. And Reacher knows. Someone has betrayed him. But there's still one problem. He doesn't know why. So he starts digging deeper. The investigation reveals a connection between the supposed mastermind and an earlier event. Something that seemed irrelevant suddenly becomes extremely important. Perhaps a name appeared in an old report. Perhaps a company was involved in a previous operation. Perhaps someone who died years earlier had a connection to the current conspiracy. This is classic Reacher territory. The past isn't dead. It's evidence. And Reacher understands that. He starts reconstructing the history. He looks at dates, locations, people, money. And eventually, he discovers a pattern. The conspiracy didn't begin recently. It's been developing for years. Maybe even decades. That means episode 5 isn't simply revealing the villain. It's revealing the history behind the villain. And then comes the betrayal. Reacher discovers that someone he thought was helping the investigation has been feeding information to the enemy. The confrontation is tense. There is no need for a massive speech. Reacher simply asks, "How long?" The person refuses to answer. Reacher asks again. "How long have you been working for them?" And eventually, the truth comes out. But here's where the story becomes interesting. The person isn't the mastermind. They're just another piece. They were receiving orders from someone above them. Someone they've never met. Someone who communicates through intermediaries. And that means Reacher is still hunting the real enemy. By now,